And hello, everybody. I'm so glad you could make it. So I think a lot of you have probably heard of the term death by PowerPoint. Many of us have heard of it. Many of us have experienced it. And unfortunately, some of us have been the cause of it. Coming from a technical background, and technical, when I say technical, it means anything where you possess a vernacular and a set of information that perhaps your audience doesn't. So technical can mean computer technical, technical can mean safety and OSHA, it can mean just about anything financial. So those of us in technical professions, when we are in front of people and we need to communicate something important to them, sometimes we don't do a great job of leveraging PowerPoint to help us. And, you know, of course, creating a presentation that's really going to be meaningful for the audience. We know what we're talking about. The idea is that we need to get them to know what we're talking about. So today we're going to talk about what works and what doesn't. And if you recognize some of your own techniques in these, if it helps, I've learned to do most of this by doing it wrong first. And I'm up in front of people virtually every day of my working life. I'm either on webinars, as we are today, or I'm in front of people at a conference or at a company in training. So I've done it wrong and I've done it right, and I've experienced an audience that I have lost and had to get back. So we talk about what works and what doesn't. We're going to get you to fast-track content. So part of the reason I think some presentations are, I don't know, hideous or boring or don't engage the audience is because working in PowerPoint can really be a pain. It is by far the worst word processor I've ever worked with. So we're going to show you some ways to get around that so that getting the content part in is easy. So you can spend the time using that creative energy to really create a good presentation rather than fighting with text in a box. I often have to laugh when I look at my older presentations that my first 5 slides were awesome, and then the last 10 or 15 were terrible because I already ran out of energy fighting with the stupid little boxes. All right, we're going to talk about graphics and animation, when, what, and why. Graphics and animation both can really, really help communicate, especially graphics. When you're communicating technical information, pictures help, graphs help, charts help. Help people to visualize what it is you're talking about and then understand the why of it for them. If you tell me, you know, our budget is allocated so that we're not operating efficiently and you just show me a bunch of numbers, that doesn't mean anything to me. If you show me a chart that shows expenditures on, back office things are like way up, now that means something to me, and now I can respond to that and react with that and interact with you. Animation, I think all of us have probably been to that over-animated presentation where things are beeping and flashing and flying across the screen. When I sit in one of those, my first impression is that I bet you just went to PowerPoint class and you learned how to do all this cool stuff and you did it all in this one presentation. Animation has its place, and animation has its place at different levels depending on the platform. So in a webinar such as this, you actually have a little more license to use animation because you're not there. You're not there waving your hands and giving your facial expressions, and it's missing something. So animation is a little more permissible, but you have to do it right. Otherwise, it is just simply annoying. We're going to talk about getting Excel data into PowerPoint. Most of us have to, especially if we're conveying anything financial, anything logistical, anything technical, we are bringing Excel data into PowerPoint, so we'll visit that as well. And tips for repurposing our decks. So if you're spending a lot of time creating these PowerPoint presentations, one of the worst things in the world is to have to do it again. So we're going to talk about ways that we can create decks so that they are repurposable, so that we're not reinventing the wheel each time. So things that don't work. Just because you can put a bunch of information on a slide doesn't mean you should. Don't pack it full. If you intend to use your presentation itself as printed medium, so you're going to print this out and hand it to them, and then you're going to deliver it also from the screen, those are two different pieces media. So you don't need to pack your slide full just so they have a lot of things to read. If you're not going to be delivering this presentation personally, and you simply are going to be distributing your deck for people to read, have at it. I don't understand necessarily why you would use PowerPoint. Word is probably a better thing to distribute something printed. But if you're going to use PowerPoint and all they're going to do is read it, most of this isn't going to apply to you. This is for giving that presentation either online or in person, or where somebody is self-directing it through a kiosk or an online portal where they're paging through it themselves. That is what this presentation applies to. Don't riddle your presentation with bullet points are fine. They serve the purpose, but you know, if it's slide after slide after slide with bullets and bullets and bullets, you're going to lose them. I don't know if any of you have ever done a long road trip. I'm rather fond of long road trips myself. I've driven from Chicago to Houston, which is roughly about 18 to 20 hours. And one of the dangers of long road trips and a lot of highway travel is what they call white line fever. And so you get focused on that center line and you don't look anywhere else. Well, after a few slides of bullet points, the same thing happens to your audience. They sort of check out and they're just kind of looking at the screen. So bullets, while they are useful, aren't the only thing you can use to communicate content. And as I mentioned before, don't use the same file for the handout. If you've downloaded the handout for this presentation, you'll notice it looks a little different than the presentation. Some of the slides are represented there in the handout itself, but the handout it's a value add. It has a purpose. There may be questions in there. There are lines to write on, and I don't mean those little lines next to three tiny little slides. You know, when you guys do that 3-slide on a page thing with the tiny little lines next to it. When I get those, I feel cheated. If I already can't see your slide and now you've shrunk it down to a tiny thumbnail and given me a few lines to write on, I feel cheated. I feel like my time is not valued. Give me something I can use, or if I don't need a handout, don't give me one, or give me something that supplements or adds value to what you're presenting. And we'll talk about how to do that. It's not as hard as you might think. And slides are not a script from which to be read. If you're standing up in front of a room and you are facing your presentation and you are reading that slide, you are, not showing your best side. I know my backside's not my best side to show the audience. And they can read themselves. So I know you feel that way. When you sit in a presentation and that presenter is simply reading your slide, you're going, why don't you just send me the thing? Send me an email. I can read. I don't need you to read this to me. So here's when we talk about packing a slide full. I have seen slides that are about packed this way. And it's hard to read as I get to some of you you don't even hear me right now because you're trying to read what's going on the slide. Let me bring you back for a second, if I can. In fact, let me get off the slide for a second. Probably even worse. When people are trying their best to focus on what is on your slide, they're squinting, they're craning their necks forward, and they do not hear you. These are examples of slides that don't work. There's too much information on the slide. People are squinting at it, trying to figure out what you're trying to tell them, and they can't hear you. It's possible until right now you haven't heard me at all. So those last few slides are examples of what not to do. This, by the way, let's take a look at the one before it. This is a 10-step process to do the hokey pokey. That's too many items on the slide. They're packed too close together. It's difficult to look at this from the audience. This is 5 items with only a handful of words each. This you can read. If I put this in the handout, this is useful. This is a list. This is me after your presentation sitting at my desk checking off the steps as I complete them. This is me sitting in your training class looking at these 5, then these 5 steps. This is easier to see from the screen, this makes more sense in the handout. So when I'm preparing my presentation, I have all three of these slides. This one is typically hidden, and I only unhide it when I generate the handout. When I generate the handout, this one and this one get deleted. Now, I know that seems like a lot of work, but when you see how easy it is to get content into PowerPoint, we'll show you some tricks for that, this won't seem so daunting. When you're getting ready to get into a presentation, if this is what your slides look like, first of all, this is bullet, sub-bullet, and sub-sub-bullet, and sub-sub-sub-sub-bullet down there. This isn't presentation quality. This is an outline. This is fine for a document. This doesn't work up on the screen. It's too much information, and people are trying to negotiate down and trying to correlate what the levels mean, and they can't really hear you. Bottom line, if your presentation can survive without you, I hear this in hallways, I can't make your meeting, just send me your deck. If your presentation can survive without you, you didn't need to have a meeting. You could just send people your deck. If your presentation can't stand without you, then this should not be what your slides look like. You can give this as a handout, but not up on the screen. And if your slides are really, really packed, you are not making an impact with your audience. They literally cannot hear you. They're so focused on trying to discern what's on the screen, they do not hear you.